And my thanks to Aintu for bringing this motion forward today. It is absolutely timely. The role of the President has, of course, changed somewhat in recent decades, and of course the President has its essential constitutional duties to fulfil, but there is a wider significance to the Head of State's role that is not set out in Oireachtas na hÉireann, but has nonetheless come to be a central aspect of it. The role of acting as a first citizen, of unifying and representing the Irish people at home and abroad, the role of being a voice for the Irish people. That aspect has grown in significance through the active presidencies of Mary Robinson, Mary McAleese and Michael D. Higgins, all of whom have carried out their role with distinction. It is absolutely correct, therefore, that we pause from time to take stock of how best our electoral system can function in support of a presidency which itself has evolved and will continue to evolve with our society and with our politics. I appreciate that this motion is prompting us to do so, and there are elements of this motion that I agree with and there are others that I don't. I'll begin with those that I agree with, most pertinently the extension of the voting franchise in presidential elections to Irish citizens in the North. We debated this issue not too long ago, and my position on the matter hasn't changed in the intervening few months. The motion references the Convention on the Constitution. Now, the Convention was established by the Labour Party when we were in government, and its fifth report, which was published in November 2013, recommended that Irish citizens resident outside the state should have the right to vote in presidential elections. This, of course, would include those Irish citizens born and living in the North. Many of the recommendations arising out of that convention have been acted on 12 years later, but this issue remains outstanding, and this is despite several commitments from different governments since then. The Fine Gael government, supported by Fianna Fáil from 2016 to 2020, committed to holding a referendum on extending the franchise for presidential elections to citizens living abroad. Then Taoiseach Enda Kenny reaffirmed that commitment on a St. Patrick's Day trip to the US in 2017. Leo Varadkar then announced in 2019 that he was postponing such a referendum at the upcoming local and European elections until later that year in 2019, but it was never taken up again. And it's quite incredible that in the 12 years since the fifth report of the Convention, virtually nothing has been done to advance this really key recommendation. And Labour supports the holding of a referendum on extending the franchise to citizens in the North and further afield. But when we debated this issue back in June, I made the point that an extensive amount of preparatory work would need to be done in advance. Work such as arranging for voter registration for citizens in the North, working out the voting method, the costs and the resources required, and ensuring the security of the ballot, and so on. None of this is straightforward, and we need to take lessons from the recent referenda with regards to preparation and groundwork ahead of holding any referendum like this. Other issues that would need to be addressed in advance would be questions around whether or not the right to vote should be restricted to those born on the island of Ireland, all those with citizenship, or simply passport holders. Labour would support citizenship as the condition for eligibility. But, as I said previously, I think a good first step in addressing those questions and others would be to establish a special Oireachtas committee that could tease out these issues, get into the nuts and bolts of how voting would work, provide a roadmap for implementation and make substantive recommendations. The committee hearings would also play an important role in informing the public debate, as we saw during the repeal referendum. And rushing a constitutional amendment through without substantial work done on the wording and without heeding the recommendations of such an Oireachtas committee should it be set up. And this is exactly what happened last year with the failed referendums there. You know, you would be risking setting up a referendum for failure if you didn't take these preparatory steps. So I would again emphasise that the Labour Party supports holding a referendum to extend the franchise in presidential elections to citizens in the North. But I would also warn against going into it without having done the extensive and detailed planning work that it would require. Now, a separate issue dealt with in the motion today concerns a loosening in requirements around nominations to get on the ballot paper for our presidential election. I don't think we can ignore the fact that many people in this country feel like they aren't represented by either candidate in the ongoing presidential campaign. And that is a legitimate position to hold, and it is coming up on the doors as I'm canvassing over the last number of weeks. I think we can all agree here that the sentiment outlined in the motion, that a competition of diverse values and ideas is good for democracy. And indeed, healthy and good-spirited debate is the very essence of our democracy. With that being said, though, one issue I do have with the motion is the line that states, the Constitution and the law set out the nomination process by Oireachtas members, county councils and the nomination by an incumbent, and these rules make it difficult for a prospective candidate to get onto the ballot paper. I do think we need to remember we are talking about the highest office in the land here. And from my perspective, I don't think it should be easy to get on the ballot paper. It shouldn't be the case that a person simply decides they want to run for the presidency one day and that they can expect that to be facilitated with no questions asked. No one is entitled to receive a nomination. You should be required to do the hard yards. Whatever your thoughts are on either candidate left in the presidential race, there can be little doubt that both of them have dedicated years and years of their lives to public service. I'm deeply uncomfortable with the idea that someone should be entitled to get on the ballot paper on the basis of their celebrity, or the fact that they have a following online, or that they have the personal wealth to put a large amount of money behind a campaign. I'd also point to the fact that the requirements for getting on the ballot in a presidential election, particularly the nomination by 20 Oireachtas members, has been the case since our constitution was written and enacted in 1937. And leaving aside the 1938 presidential election, in which Douglas Hyde was elected unopposed, given the ever-increasing number of members of this Dáil, of this House, it has actually gotten easier to get on the ballot paper in terms of the percentage of members' nominations required. I am open to the conversation around reforming the nomination process, though. Like I said, we must acknowledge that there are those who feel unrepresented by having only 2 candidates in this race. But equally, we must maintain high standards and a high bar for those seeking a nomination. The office of President deserves that level of respect. It is not something we should treat lightly. I would suggest that these issues around the nomination process and voting rights might actually be best served by a short time-limited citizens' assembly. I also have some difficulty with the suggestion that an incumbent should be able to nominate a candidate. I think that risks politicising the office of President if someone couldn't get a nomination through one of the existing avenues and then pressure was put on the President to nominate them. For example, would a Fianna Fáil President be under pressure to nominate Billy Kelleher, or would a Labour President be under pressure to nominate a Labour candidate in circumstances where we didn't have the required 20 Oireachtas signatures? Labour won't be supporting the motion on the basis of those aspects that I've outlined, but I'd again like to emphasise that we don't oppose the essence of the motion, that we should seek to extend the voting franchise to citizens in the North, and that we should look at ways to ensure a diversity of candidates. That's something that I think we should all be able to agree on. And I again thank Deputies Tobin and Lawless for giving us the opportunity to reflect on our electoral system this week and to renew our commitment to bringing forward a referendum. Citizens in the North have now waited 12 years and counting since the Constitutional Convention's recommendation to allow them a franchise. It's time to deliver for them. And it's vital we continue to value the office of Ciaran Ahern. And I hope everyone, despite any misgivings about the process or indeed the choice of candidates on the ballot this week, that people actually come out and exercise their franchise, raise their voice and vote on Friday in this very pivotal presidential election. Good morning.